I'm going to go ahead and show you some common mistakes developers make when they're first learning how to program in Java. One of them being working with data types in variables. So for example, if I have int x equals 4, this just is going to allocate a place in memory, call it x, so you can access the value later again, and it's going to assign a value of 4 to this memory slot. Of course, when I run this and I execute, it's not going to do anything because we're not printing, we're not actually outputting anything in this program. However, you'll see that if I put 4.6 or even 4.0, we're going to get a compiler error because at this point, you're trying to put a double or float type into an integer, and it's not going to work. So when I execute, it's going to tell me incompatible types, possible lossy conversion from double to int. So the program will actually not run. It fails to compile here because we are doing something illegal in Java. We cannot put anything of type decimal inside of type int. However, if we have a double and we say in double x equals 4, this will work because 4 can be converted. You can go one way, but you can't go the other way. So if you have 4.0, you can't put it in an int, but if you have 4, you can put it in a double because it'll just assume what you meant to say was 4.0. So the thing here is this will actually still error out, and this is another issue that developers make when they're first starting out, and this has to do with variable names. At this point, you've declared a memory location and you've called it int x, but now you're trying to declare another memory location, calling it with the same name, and that's not allowed. So here you'll see we'll get another error for saying that variable x is already defined in method main. So what you would have to do here is go ahead and change the name so you have a new memory location. So once you've declared a variable and you've given it a data type, you cannot change the data type of that variable. So I can't say int x equals 4.0 and then say, hey, I want to change x to be a double instead. You cannot do that. What you can do, however, is change the actual value of x. So you can put a 3 here instead if you don't want that 4.0. However, this 4.0 we said would error out with int, so we would have to make this, whoops, we would have to make this a double for this to really work. And you'll see now we have double x equals 4.0, and then we change it to be 3. Now, it's hard to tell what's happening in the program and if our variables actually have the correct values right now because we're not actually printing anything. So remember I showed you what the system.out.print line method can do, and we were before typing in hello world and we were seeing hello world print out. What you can also do is pass in a variable into the system.out.print. So I can type x and I'll actually get the value of x and print it out. So right now this is going to print out the number 3. Now notice how it prints out 3.0. This is because, as I said before, we made it a double. Now if I were to make this an int and put 4 and then change it to 3, it'll print out 3, not 3.0. Now, if I make this a double and I change it to be 60 or 50, it'll still add in that 0.0. Even though this is a whole number, it's going to add that 0.0. And it's going to print it out for us so we can actually see. Now, you might notice that system.out.print used to take quotes and now it's not taking quotes. This thing finished loading so you can see the 50.0 really quick. But as you see, this x no longer has quotes because we're actually getting a variable. And this variable is of type double. What system.out.print line will do is change this double to be the string version of the double. So instead of treating it like a double, it's now treating it like a string. Now, if you were to put quotes around this, instead of getting the value that's in X, it's going to actually physically print out the string containing X. So we don't want this when we're trying to access the actual value. So if you're trying to access the actual value of a variable, you don't put quotes. If you're trying to say a letter or say whatever the name of the variable is, then you do put quotes and you treat it like a string. As you can see, this prints out X. If you want to print out X, like the physical letter X and also the value that X is, you can write something like X has a value of, so this is just a string. And then if you want to add in whatever this is, the value, then you just have to put a plus and you put X. So anytime you have a variable and you have some string in quotes, to add them together to make a one longer string, you have to put plus X. So this should print out X has a value of 50.0. There it is. X has a value of 50.0. Make sure that you put these spaces wherever you need them, because sometimes we forget and then it looks a little weird because then the 50 will be right on top of this colon. Additionally, you can add as many strings as you want. You can even have a string here with just a space and you add it. So you can add strings together. You can add strings to variables. We'll talk more about what this string concatenation is in the next lesson after, I think I'm gonna have one more video before the next lesson that's gonna cover this. But basically you can just add a bunch of things and we'll talk about that more later. But this goes ahead and types out X has a value of colon, and then now it also has a space, and then it has the X. So here it is.